All right, so we're graphing lines. We've been working on this in class, and so the purpose of this video is just in case you're a little bit lost or you missed a class period or something. And so y equals mx plus b should be very familiar to you at this point. Remember the x and the y, so these guys right here, these stay in the equation. You're always going to see the x and the y. The number in front of x, or being multiplied to x, remember that is your slope. All right, so m is the slope. I think I've already said that. And so m is, so if you're taking notes, right, you're writing this down, this is going to be your slope. This is going to be how you rise over run, how you move from one point to the other, right? So let's write how you move. It describes it for you. How do you move from one point to the other? It's interesting that that comes first in the equation, because really that's not what comes first when you're doing anything with a line. In fact, what comes first is this other guy, the guy that's being added or subtracted on at the end. This is what comes first. This is always what you do first, and this is called your Y-intercept. Okay, so x equals 0, because it's the Y-intercept, x equals 0. It's on the y-axis. It's where you cross the y-axis. So you're going to have x is 0, y is whatever the b value is. So that's where you start. You always look there, you say, hey, I'm going to start right there. That's where I'm going to cross the y-axis, which is the one going up and down. And then I'm going to move from there, which is your slope. Okay, so this is your start. Even in a word problem, where does your word problem start? That's what you're going to do. So let's look at an example. Let's say that we had y equals 2x minus 1. So I draw my xy axis. I start with my y-intercept, which is a minus 1. So on the y-axis, I find negative 1, and I put my point there. So a lot easier on grid paper. Hopefully you're using grid paper, because that would be way, way easier. Then I go to how does it move? How does it move here? And that's the number in front of x. So what's the rise over run? Now remember, we talk rise over run. And in order to talk rise over run, I actually have to have it over something. Since this isn't over anything, I'm just going to put it over 1, because you can always make something into a fraction by putting it over 1. So that means I'm going to rise 2, run 1. Both numbers are positive, so since it's a positive 2, I'm going to go rise 2, and then it's a run 1, positive, which means I'm going to go to the right one, and that's where my next point goes. Notice I didn't do my point until I did both rise and run. Then I did a point. And then from that point, I can rise 2, run 1, put a point. Rise 2, run 1, put a point. Or we can go the other way. If I want to go the other way, what I do is I do the opposite of both of them. So I'm going to make it a negative 2 and a negative 1. So I do the opposite. So I go down 2 to the left 1. Down 2 to the left 1, and you should see that it still makes that line that we were doing. And of course you always have to graph the line. A line isn't a line until you actually graph the line. Okay, let's look at another example. How about y equals negative 2/3 x plus 1. I'm going to draw my xy axis. We start with our y-intercept, which is a plus 1. Now this 2/3 are slope, right? That negative is out in front of my fraction. Now what I need to do is I need to make either the top negative or the bottom negative so that I have the negative on just one of them. See, here's the thing. If I was to put it on both of them, then that would mean I have a negative divided by a negative, and those would cancel out, and all of a sudden I'd have a positive fraction. But I don't have a positive fraction, I have a negative fraction. So I can't do it that way. I need to get rid of one of my negatives, and so I'm just going to put it on the top. That's usually where I start, is I put it on the top, which means the rise is negative, so I'm going to go down, and the run is positive, so I'm going to go to the right. So I go down 2 to the right 1, 2, 3, and put my point. Down 2 to the right 1, 2, 3, and put my point. I could go the other way, which means I need to do the opposite. So the opposite of negative 2 is a positive 2. The opposite of 3 is a negative 3. Positive 2 means I go up 2. Negative 3 means I go to left 3. So I go up 2 to the left, 1, 2, 3. up 2, to the left 1, 2, 3. And now I have my line. And the last thing we're going to talk about is what if your thing is not in slope-intercept form? So what if I gave you this, negative 3x plus 2y equals 8? So it's not y equals mx plus b. Then what you have to do is you have to get it so it's y equals mx plus b. So if we look at the y has the 2 with it, and I'm going to do that last. Remember, we get rid of those multiplication last. So I'm going to get rid of the 3x first. It says it's minusing 3x, right? Because I'm going to look at this as a whole thing. And I see I have a minus in front, and there's a plus there, so there's adding and subtracting going on. I'm going to go with this minus in front, though, because that belongs to the 3x. So it says minus 3x, so to move it over, I'm going to add 3x to the other side. So these 0 pair out. And now I have 2y equals 8 plus 3x. And then I have to get rid of the 2, and that's being multiplied, so I'm going to divide by 2. And to help myself out, instead of dividing the whole side on the other one, I'm just going to divide each one separate. So then that means these 2's cancel, become 1, so y equals 8 divided by 2, that's 4. And 3 divided by 2, I can't divide them, but I can just write it as 3 over 2x. Okay, now this is a little bit backwards as far as how I normally write it, but I can still read it. Because remember, the slope is with the x, and the y-intercept is being added on or subtracted. So I start with my y-intercept, and that crosses at 4. And then I go to my slope. They're both positive. So my rise is 3, that's up 3. 1, 2, 3. And my run is a positive 2, so it's the right 2. And there I get my point. 1, 2, 3 to the right 2. Or we could do the opposite of both of them, so make it a negative 3 and a negative 2. And I could go down 1, 2, 3 to the left 2. Down 1, 2, 3 to the left 2. And then there is my line. And so that would be how you do that. If it's not y equals mx plus b, then you just make it y equals mx plus b.